Friends, in this video session I am going to explain how to create the card layout. So first I will show you a sample output. How does it look like? See that. Here I have some user interface components. You can see this, each and every component is a button. This is a button, another button, this is another button, this is another button. But you might have noticed when I click this button whose label is second panel, you are getting a different layout here. When I click this button whose label is first panel, you can see that a different layout is loaded here, but these two are not changed. Okay, now this is called card layout. When you click this button, you can see that this is loaded. When you click this button and another layout is loaded, and each layout you can call it as something like a card. This is the concept of card layout. When I click this button, one card will be loaded where this card has some buttons. You can see that, and these buttons are in the grid format. And here when you click this one, we are getting another card whose layout is the border layout. Fine. So how to implement that? So first I am going to create an applet where I am going to keep one button here in this side and one button here in this left side. So one button on the right side and one button in the left side. For that I am going to follow the border layout. So how to do that, we are going to see that. So create a new applet class. For that, new applet. For example, we will say demo for card layout. And if you want, we can mention the package. I'm going to keep the package name as card and click finish. You can see that there is a package got created, card, and here we can see the class demo for card layout. So again, first of all, I am going to create a button here and another button here. So how will you do that? So for that I need two buttons. Button, we call it as first, and one more, that is we call it as second. And these two buttons I am going to instantiate inside the init method. First new button with a label as first, and the second one I am going to instantiate with the label as second. Now we have to add these buttons to applet. So as you know how to add the components by using the add method. Add first, add second. Okay, now we are going to see what is the outcome of this. Are we getting something similar to here like this? For that I am going to run the applet, and you can see that we are not getting the expected, but we are getting these two buttons, but we want one button to come in to the right side and one button to the left side. We can say east and west. This is called east part and this is called west part. The reason here why we are not getting the expected output is by default applet gives the layout, applet follows the layout, flow layout. Flow layout means first it will fill the first row, then it will go to the second row horizontally like this. Once it is, we can see that when it is resized, it is going to the second row. If there is enough space in the first row, you can see that the second button is coming in the first row itself. But we don't want like this format. We want something similar to this. We want the first button to here and the second button here. So how will you do that? For that we have to use flow layout. For that we can call like this, set layout, and which layout manager you want to use. Create the object for that layout. New border layout. And if you want, we can mention the horizontal gap as well as vertical gap. If you don't want, leave it. For simplicity, I'm not mentioning any horizontal gap or vertical gap. So here we are setting the layout as to set the layout as border layout. Now when you mention the border layout, while adding we have to say this button should come to which portion. For example, followed by, we can say border layout dot, there are so many options like this: east, north, south, west. So we are going to say that this should go to the east, and the second one we are going to say that it should go to the west. Now we are going to check the output. Now see that we are getting the expected output. First button here. Now see the already existing one. First here we are getting that button, and here we are getting second button. Now when you click the second button, see, when I click the second button, I want a different layout to be loaded. This is getting something called a card. So one card is loaded where each card is implemented by using the concept called a panel. So we can say that when you click this button first, a panel should be loaded here, which has some different layout. When you click this second one, and another panel should be loaded here, which has some different layout with some components. So for that, what are the things to be done? So now let me minimize it and let me close our intermediate output. Yeah. So for that we need panels. So we are, as you have observed, when I click this one card. When I click this one, and another card. So totally two cards are there. So it means two panels. So I am going to create those panels. For that we have a standard class called panel. I will say that first panel, and next one second panel. And now this first panel, this and here this is one panel, this is another panel. So these both panels should be added to another panel, where this another panel we are going to name it as main panel. So we'll be adding first panel and second panel to the main panel. Later main panel should be added to the applet. So I'll write it here. Add first panel and second panel to the main panel. So the main panel's layout, you have to say that card layout, and later this main panel should be added to the applet. Later main panel should be added to the applet. So first thing is add the first panel and the second panel to the main panel, where the main panel's layout must be card layout. Then the main panel should be added to the applet. So where it should be added, for that I am taking the output of this one. It should be added to the center. So at that time we have to say that add main panel comma border layout dot center. So when I click the first one, we'll be calling the first panel to be loaded. When I click the second button, the second panel should be loaded. So now I'm going to instantiate the first panel and the second panel. First panel, okay, and we are going to follow some layout in the first panel. So for example, we'll follow the grid layout. We will say that it maintains 2 rows and 2 columns. So here we can add components to the first panel in grid layout format. That is the meaning of that. Now I am going to instantiate the second panel. Second panel, new panel, and here I am following some different layout. For example, if we want, we can say that it is following a border layout. For that, new border layout. To set the layout, just pass the object of particular layout to the constructor of panel. Here it is of border layout. So it means add components to the second panel in border layout format. So next I am going to add some components to the first panel. For that I am going to use some buttons like this. First panel dot add some components, for example new button, some label I am going to give, for example 1. So here you can see that 2 rows and 2 columns, so it needs some 4 components. So I am going to add some 4 buttons. So I am just copying it and pasting it 3 times. And here I am going to say that this is 2, this is 3, this is 4. So now we added components to the first panel. Like that, next we are going to add components to the second panel. For that, second panel dot add. Here also I am going to use some buttons. For example, new button. Let it be 11. And here you can see that to the second panel we are adding the components to the border layout format. So here we can mention where it should come. Here I am going to say that border layout dot in the north position like this, north, and here it must be specified within the double quotes because we have to follow the string format. Fine, like that. Add few more components. So another button we are adding, and here we can say that it should be in the south. So north, south we are adding, and one more button I'm going to add it. So let it be added in the sender. For that we have an option called the sender. You can see that north, south and sender, and if you want you can add to east and west. So now we have first panel and second panel, where each panel has its own components. The first panel is maintaining some components of 4 buttons. The second panel is maintaining some components, 3 buttons, where each panel has its own layout. The first panel is following the layout, grid layout, and the second panel is following the layout, border layout. Now these 2 panels should be added to the main panel, where main panel's layout format should be CardLayout. So I'm going to declare the reference variable for CardLayout. Let the name be CL, and I'm going to instantiate the CardLayout. So for that, already we have declared the reference variable CL equal new CardLayout, and CardLayout also, if you want, we can mention the horizontal gap as well as vertical gap. For the simplicity, I am not mentioning any of those arguments. I am keeping it as empty. New CardLayout. Now I am going to instantiate the main panel. For that, main panel equal new panel. So here I am going to say that the main panel follows the CardLayout. If we want, we can directly mention new CardLayout as how we followed here. But later I need this CardLayout instance. Later we'll understand why I kept it like this. I have instantiated the CardLayout separately, and its reference is given to CL, and that CL is passed as an argument to the constructor of panel. If we want, we can directly mention like this also, new CardLayout. But instead of this, I instantiated separately like this, and I am passing it as an argument like this. Later we will understand why I did like this at the end of this video. So instantiate the main panel and set its layout as CardLayout. Now add first panel and second panel to the main panel. For that, main panel dot add first panel. Now add the second panel, main panel dot add second panel. So now we added the 2 panels, first panel and second panel, to the main panel. Now what we have to do is, we have to, as I told you earlier, that add main panel to the applet. Add main panel to the applet, and here in the applet already we have set the layout as border layout. So when we add the main panel to the applet, we can mention to which part of the applet or at what place it should be laid out. As you see, here we have two buttons in this applet, first and second. The first is kept in the east, that is in the right side. The second button is kept in the west side. Now we are going to add another component, that is the main panel, and I am going to say that it should be added to the center. For that, just call add method, add main panel. We can say border layout dot center. You can say we are adding the main panel to the applet's center. So now we have two panels, first panel and the second panel, where each panel has its own components. Later we added the first panel and second panel to the main panel, where main panel's layout is card layout. Then later we added the main panel to the applet's center by using border layout center. Now I am going to perform the event handling. For that, I am going to override the start method. Now when we click the first button, the first panel should be loaded. For that, register the button first with event listener. For that, first dot add action listener. Then I am going to use the anonymous inner class concept here. Add action listener. Remove this throw exception. Like this, I am going to register the button. What's the button name? Button name is second. Button second with event listener. For that, second dot add action listener, new action listener. Then we have the automatically generated code, so remove the throw exception. Fine. So when you click the first button, the first panel should be loaded. For that, here we have the code to add the first panel to the main panel, add the second panel to the main panel. So while adding, I can give some name to the first panel. So I am going to say that first card, and for the second one I am going to name it as second card. So here while adding, we are giving some name to the first panel as first card, for the second panel second card. So when I click the first button, I am going to use the card layout instance. Then I am going to call the show method, and the first argument, that is your parent. So here these two cards are added to the panel called main panel. So main panel is the parent. So from the main panel, call the first one by using the name first card. Now I hope that you might have understood why I separately instantiated the card layout, because here I want to take the card layout instance. Using the card layout instance, we can call the method show. At that time we have to say from which parent we are calling, and in that parent mention the name of the card which you want to call. So same like that we have to put in for the second, we have to put for the second button. So at that time you can say that the second one's name is second card. So now we'll check whether we are getting the expected output or not. Run file. You can see that the first card by default it will be loaded. When I click the second button, you can see that 11, 12, 13, you can see that 11 we kept in the north, 12 we kept in the south, 13 we kept in the center. If I click the first button, you can see the first panel is loaded. First panel we have 4 buttons in the grid format. Second, like this. This is how the card layout works. Thank you for watching this video.